Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Avasant and Hitachi podcast on reimagining enterprise innovation in manufacturing. I'm your host, Sahaj Kumar, and I'm an associate director for research here at Avasant. And today, we are going to explore how enterprises are navigating disruption and embedding intelligence and reimagining their operation to thrive in the digital era. As we have been seeing, the manufacturing industry, it is sitting at the epicenter of transformation. Whether we look at AI adoption to industry specific innovations, from global macroeconomic shifts to large scale solution modernization, manufacturers are rethinking how they design, build, and deliver products. And at the center of it all is enterprise innovation. It's not just a buzzword, but a survival strategy from a long term competitiveness perspective. Joining me today is Anupam Bhatnagar from Hitachi Digital Services, part of one Hitachi ecosystem that's bring together digital capabilities, industrial expertise, and operational strengths. Anupam, why don't you introduce yourself for our viewers?
Thank you, Sahaj. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I'm Anupam Bhatnagar. I lead up the manufacturing vertical at Hitachi Digital Services in North America. And, I'm excited to be part of this podcast.
Thank you, Anupam. Together, we'll be exploring how organizations can rethink innovation and adopt emerging technologies responsibly and create sustainable growth paths. The discussion area that we'll be having would be across different areas of AI, enterprise innovation, and several others. So let's just start off with enterprise innovation, Anupam. The very definition of enterprise innovation has changed, right? And we are seeing that it's no longer being about isolated R&D projects or incremental process and improvements. Instead, it's becoming a boardroom priority and a company-wide strategy that touches every function from operations to supply chain to customer experience and business models. How do you see enterprises moving from siloed operations to truly enterprise-wide transformation models?
So, when it comes to innovation, which has obviously been a topic of discussion, whenever you talk to a client, but now with sort of the democratization of AI, it's all sort of intertwined with AI and innovation. And I think as this topic gains more and more importance in the boardroom, the things that we would talk about that would lead to enterprises sort of moving from siloed innovation to enterprise-wide initiatives would be like I'd highlight three things. One, they've got to be clear KPIs that are linked to enterprise outcomes. So where does the project fit into the overall enterprise roadmap? And the roadmap in turn should be tied to clear financial outcomes as a time to market, cost to serve, or even bring it a level lower. Things like reducing energy consumption, reducing scrap, de-risk the supply chain. But there's got to be some specifics out there. So that's one. Second, the governance and change velocity is critical, and at the center of it all is executive sponsorship. Do these initiatives have support from leadership across the board? Because innovation projects don't have a linear path, as they progress. There are some highs which are super highs, but the lows are super lows. And as these projects run into roadblocks, whether it's funding or org distraction or talent turnover, exec sponsorship is key to get over the hump. Because these initiatives will often not meet conventional org thresholds to sustain. So that's the second piece. And the third, of course, is really the high reuse and replicability of these pilot assets. Successful enterprises really do a lot of work in advance because, while initiating these projects requires a lot of out-of-the-box creativity, sustaining innovation really requires a very process-centric approach. Does the enabling ecosystem allow ease of reuse on the platform of choice? Are the org red lines around issues such as compliance and security proactively addressed? Are org incentives in place to promote sharing and collaboration? I mean, some, very blocking and tackling things, but they need to be in place to really sustain innovation in the long term.
No, thank you. Those were some great points. And I think we at Avasant Research are also saying something very similar to this. And we are seeing that, leading enterprises are embedding innovation at scale, right? Leveraging digital platforms, data-driven insights, and collaborative ecosystems. But yet, a lot of them still struggle to move beyond pilots, right? And you talked about how to create sustainable, enterprise-wide frameworks. So what do you think essentially are the practices that differentiate organizations that get institutionalize innovation successfully at scale from those that just remain stuck in the experimentation mode?
Well, the first is the very obvious ones. There's got to be visionary leadership in place. Really, what that means is there shouldn't be fear of failure. because
Right.
you've got to be willing to tinker with operating models even when they're working. This is not really reckless risk taking, but it's, evidence led risk taking. You need to have the acumen to drive the timing of decisions so that, it's not too soon when the product is not ready for prime time, and not delayed so much that the moment has passed. So leadership
Right.
is key. A second is you've got to approach pilots with, what we would call a scalability test. The
Right.
enterprises must have in place a scalable, enabling tech stack. That makes the project viable, because, having science experiments that just serve to fulfill curiosity will never scale, because, you're not sort of addressing enterprise objectives.
Right.
And the last one, I think, which is getting even more sort of important in our age, is really talent scaling. So, again, it's a subset of scaling, but it just needs to be called out on its own, because the best organizations source and develop the best talent. And again, the key out here is not sourcing, but developing, because not everyone embraces change spontaneously. You might have talent in-house, but you have to bring them along when you're sort of embarking on an initiative like this. Much of your talent, or many among your talent,
Yeah.
will be intimidated by change as well. So, for us, good companies enable talent through both training, but as also with change initiatives.
No, thank you. So those were some great points, Anupam. And I think, I think that definitely lays out an area about how and what should be done to essentially take it from an experimentation to a full-fledged, I would say, an innovation, right? But we are also seeing, Anupam, that manufacturers today are innovating in one of the most complex macroeconomic environments, right?
Yep.
What we have seen in decades, so to say. There have been some persistent supply chain volatility, inflationary pressures, shifting trade dynamics, sustainable imperatives, and right. And along with that, we are also seeing rapid emergence of Industry 5.0. So, from a backdrop, it seems too complex, right? And at the same time, the customer demands are increasing. Faster delivery, personalization, greener products, right? And these macro factors are just driving companies to rethink their strategies. And this essentially, in my opinion, means that the innovation cannot happen in isolation, right? It must be contextualized with the macro trends and long-term market evolution, I would say. And we have seen successful enterprises balancing resilience with bold investments, as we were talking about, right? So to take it from an experimentation to a full-fledged. So what macro trends do you see impacting the most manufacturing sector in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think the key one is the rapid rewiring of supply chains in response to the geopolitical triggers that we see around us. It's the tariffs, or it's the reshoring of operations, and the geopolitical risks around critical materials availability, especially in sort of transformational domains like EVs. It's setting the
Mhm.
stage for the broader manufacturing sector. I think that's the
Right.
most critical one. And while one would expect it'll go with sort of as the geopolitics evolves, but I think it's going to be there to stay. The second, of course, the very obvious one, is the infusion of AI across the manufacturing supply chain. So, and all the issues that you hear about AI, whether it's responsible AI, or
Right.
it's all the energy intensity of all the with the proliferation of data centers. That's sort of dominating, the macro landscape, and that obviously impacts enterprise strategy. So,
Right.
there's also, I mean, you've got to look at also the gulf, and actually the gulf is widening between leaders that embrace AI and
Right.
the laggards, because it's just going to become worse as we progress through time. And the last one, I think it's one that's maybe sort of slipped enterprise consciousness in North America a little bit, but certainly not so in Europe, is sustainability and
Right.
mandatory disclosure requirements. So I think those are the three macro trends I would say are the ones that would be the ones to watch for our sector.
Oh, sure. I think, and we'll come to that AI aspect later. There, I have a lot of, I would say, because everything right now is AI, right? But I
Yeah.
think you essentially talked about of what should an enterprise leader do, right? But what advice would you give to a leader trying to balance short-term resilience and long-term transformation?
Well, I think resilience has to become a part of the project plan as an outcome. I think that's key. You have to establish service level objectives around things like time to recover,
Mhm.
supplier and site redundancy.
Right.
Uncertain macro conditions, absolutely mandate that you need to have resilience as part of your project as an outcome. The second I would say is you got to retain, optionality. You can't be sort of betting the kitchen sink on all or nothing projects.
Right.
You've got to establish fast fail or fail fast metrics without sort of penalizing failures and sort of not subduing the spirit of innovation.
Yeah.
But you need to allow risk taking, but you've got to have fail fast metrics in place so that you're sort of cutting bad projects off quickly. And the last one, I think it's been there for a very long time, but just needs to be re-emphasized in the context of of AI is um, you've got to have governance that actively manages these run change trade-offs. I mean, it's always been there for as part of good management in any enterprise, but you've got to leverage metrics and transparency to support decision making.
Mhm.
Proactively drive scenario planning and prepare for adversity because that's something that's almost a given. You'll have to face adversity, small ones hopefully, but you've got to be prepared for that.
No, absolutely. And you brought up, I think, the topic about AI. So let's dwell, I would say, a little bit deeper into it, right?
Mhm.
And now we are seeing it across sectors, and even for manufacturing, AI has become the centerpiece for enterprise transformation, right? But we see that AI adoption is not uniform. Some enterprises are still focused on basic automation, while others, say, for example, are embracing a lot of predictive analytics, generative AI, and even AI powered business models, right? And AI is so what I would say is from an Avasant research perspective, we see that AI adoption is very highly uneven, right? Some organizations remain at the task of automation of basic analytics, while we see a lot of manufacturers just pushing boundaries with Gen AI, predictive maintenance, AI-driven supply chains, right? And from the spectrum, I would say it's very wide. On one end, factories are automating quality inspections using
Mhm.
computer vision, say, for example,
Mhm.
right? On the other, say, for example, they're deploying generative AI, as we were talking about, for new product prototypes.
Mhm.
The challenge is that many enterprises they see and hit barriers around fragmented data, legacy systems. It can be because of, say, for example, lack of skilled talent. We also see that manufacturing as a whole, with respect to others, say, for example,
Mhm.
industries, is also, from a talent shortage perspective, is also struggles with that. And sometimes it's also very a lot of unclear ROI measurement, right? So, what are the biggest barriers you see in adoption for AI across enterprises? And how do you see generative AI reshaping product engineering, supply chain, and other engagements in manufacturing?
I think the biggest issue from a barrier perspective is really inadequate data foundation. So, it's poor master data or poor governance or a combination of both, particularly in manufacturing, the absolute lack or, the relative
Mhm.
lack of IT/OT integration. So I think, and,
Right.
and the usual stuff around, data accuracy and bias and concerns around that. So I think that's the whole data foundation piece is a big one. The second is, and I think this is almost a byproduct of all the excitement that we've had around Gen AI in particular is
Right.
what's called as pilot purgatory and the inability to scale because you don't have a foundation. You sort of kicked off something that you're excited about, or you have an inadequate process
Right.
infrastructure, or simply the executive sponsorship is not there. I mean, they're sort of allowing you to play with something, but they're not in for the long haul. So I think that's the second piece of it. And thirdly, and I think this is the one that we'll probably all be focused on over the next many years is the lack of talent or there is a
Right.
shortage of talent. I think and you touched upon it when you talked about it. I think the fact that you don't have talent and then you supplement it with sometimes what
Right.
we call a lack of belief. So you might have talent, but you haven't brought them along in your journey down inadequate change management that results in a lack of belief. From our perspective, we think adoption of AI really needs to be inside out, where employees believe in the benefits in return, rather than sort of outside in, which is, hey, let's do it because
Right.
everybody else is doing. I think those are the those are the big barriers that I see with respect to AI adoption across enterprises at this point.
Okay, and you brought out a very interesting point. I think that phrase was very interesting that there is essentially an excitement around Gen AI, right? So, how do you and what suggestions, say for example, would you give to enterprise leaders who want to balance the excitement of, say for example, a Gen AI with a practical need for responsible AI? And maybe you can also help us for our viewers in understanding some of the examples how Hitachi has been helping clients in embedding AI differently across their product lifecycle.
So I think balancing really in this context is to adopt a two-track approach. There is an approach that is that's sort of focused on exploring, and the other one is focused on industrializing. And I think you need the exploratory approach to sort of garner the excitement across the troops, and it'll get you and build the initial momentum. But really, to sustain that momentum, you really need to have an industrialization approach. So I think the long-term enterprise goals need to be at the center of these exploratory initiatives. I mean, don't explore an area which doesn't have a long-term future. You should allow for some tolerance, but the deviation ought to be within an acceptable range. So don't say no to science experiments. So I think that two-track approach is critical. So I think that's one. The when you talk about process infrastructure, I think you need to have very well-defined guardrails, especially in an enterprise setting. We live in a world where cybersecurity, compliance, adherence to an organization blessed tech stack is critical. You need to have collaboration incentives in place. You need to make sure that you're addressing, bias and hallucinations. That's a given in so many of the LLMs today. So, all of these things need to come into play from a process perspective to make sure that, you're able to sustain some of the excitement that you built through that initial exploratory phase. And again, I think I keep coming back to this, the fact that we need to have executive sponsorship in place, because I think without leaders who believe, it's unlikely that you will be able to sustain the innovation. I think it's key to recognize that back in the 70s when we talked about computerization, and it was a huge disruptor of all kind of operating models, workflows, and org hierarchies. We're in the same phase again. So at this point, there's a lot of uncertainty across the system, and it's critical to retain and retrain your talent to make sure that they can go through this uncertainty in a successful way. So how do you do that? You need leaders who can, successfully separate threats from opportunities and navigate in this, incredibly volatile environment. And they do it through exemplary action, purposeful governance. You've got to bring your teams along in this journey. So I think those are a few things that you would need to do as you sort of navigate this uncertainty. So.
No, absolutely. Very well put together, Anupam. And, we talked about excitement around AI. Let's now, I would say, probably delve into, one of the least glamorous, but most critical enabler of enterprise innovation from a platform modernization perspective, right? SAP and other solution transformations. Now, when we're talking about large scale ERP, PLM systems, right, which many of which have been in place for decades, they are just now undergoing massive transformations when we look at manufacturing as a sector, right? Say, for example, SAP S/4HANA's migration is driving manufacturers to rethink not just their core ERP systems, but their entire digital backbone. And no discussion on enterprise transformation, in my opinion, is complete without addressing the modernization of core platforms, right? Whether it is from SAP or Oracles of the world, or from legacy PLM systems to cloud-native AI-enabled solutions, right? And from an Avasant research perspective as well, we are seeing modern platforms are becoming increasingly cloud-native, modular, and AI-enabled, right? Yeah. And they are not only streamlining operations, say, for example, but providing real-time insights across entire value chain, right? But the real question is, are enterprises treating solution modernization as a technical upgrade or a strategic opportunity to reinvent operations? So what is that you see, Anupam, in, say, for example, based on day-to-day conversations that you're having with different enterprises, on what role do large-scale ERP and PLM transformations play? And how do you see SAP modernization and other large platforms transformation helping in enterprise-wide innovation?
Yeah, I think you said it best. It's not boring, but it certainly isn't the one that gets a lot of
Yeah,
conversation going. But ERP is the core of any enterprise. I think, and a standard and clean core, allows for flexibility through the addition of capabilities on the edge, whether it's microservices or it's AI, without the need for major customizations that break the upgrades later. So again, there's greater transparency across the value chain. There are shorter cycle times. I mean, there's a whole bunch of benefits that come from having a clean core. And again, the same goes for PLM. A successful PLM transformation would,
yeah,
you bring in faster NPI, same principles, standardization, better traceability, shorter feedback loop. So I think, a modern ERP platform is the foundation for incorporating any step change, across the enterprise. So it provides the enterprise with an enabling engine, whether it's harmonized master data or, consistent process controls and, visibility across the value chain. That's absolutely a prerequisite for innovation such as Gen AI. So I think, this having a clean core is absolutely critical as you sort of implement AI at scale
right.
across the enterprise. So I think it's there's while you get a lot of conversation around I think it'll remain conversation unless you sort of modernize your ERP. And SAP, of course, is key for that. As is Oracle, based on whichever direction the enterprise chooses. But
Right. No, I think you brought up a very critical point, Anupam, especially about having a very clean core, right? We keep on talking about this very often, but I think a lot of enterprises day to day struggle with it. Apart from this, what pitfalls do you also commonly see, and what is your recommendation, say, for example, of how should enterprises avoid them during any such large transformation?
yeah, I think the critical piece out here is getting the scope right. I think often when we see enterprises struggling with a transformation like this, it's really because they've underestimated the scope. Because some will make it just a technology only exercise, just a lift and shift, and I think which is absolutely leaving money on the table, and it's probably not going to give you any benefit. So you've got to deeply involve the business, and honestly, from our perspective,
Mhm.
and that's what sort of Hitachi has been emphasizing all along, is for true transformation, you really need to bring IT and OT together.
Right.
Because that's I think where the real opportunity lies. That doesn't happen too often across the landscape at this point. The other, I think, is the fact that you need to bring in operating model changes to
Mhm.
allow for realizing the potential of the transformation. And sometimes this will require a lot of investment in change management, and
Right.
you need to have effective governance in place to do this. But I think a lot of companies would not do that, and they struggle.
Mhm.
So I think establishing a north star in terms of what the goal of this transformation is, and then you align everyone in the rank and file to sort of seek that north star is going to be critical. So I think that the change management piece, again, it's nothing new in there, but that's something that everyone ought to do. So that's what I would say is key.
Okay. Now, I think we talked on a lot about, I would say, the overall macroeconomics. We talked about AI. We touched upon a lot of things. Now, let's I would say, drill deep down into what role is Hitachi playing, right? What we see is Hitachi is bringing in unique advantage and table two, and we have been seeing you have guys have been talking a lot about the one Hitachi strategy, right? And you rightly pointed it out, the IT OT integration, integrating digital services, industrial expertise, and all the infrastructure capabilities. So the one Hitachi story is just not about technology. It's about co-innovation, the work that you guys are doing with your, say, for example, customers, ecosystem collaboration, and lot of partnerships that you guys have, right? What do you think, Anupam, makes Hitachi's approach very unique as compared to other players in the space?
Yeah, I think to put it in a somewhat blunt way, we eat our own dog food, and I think what I mean by that is, Hitachi as a company has been around 100 years, and we have a very rich legacy in the manufacturing domain. And when we speak to our clients, we speak from a practitioner's perspective. And again, I'll just give you an example. I mean,
Mhm.
in one of my early conversations when I joined Hitachi, was with an executive, and you're talking about smart cities. And I work for large consulting companies who are incredibly good. And you talk to a client, and you sort of put together a really good PPT in terms of what a smart city would look
Mhm.
like. You have excellent credentials and all of that. And this executive had this to say. He says, with Hitachi, you just take them to Tokyo. You take them to the Tokyo Metro. The turnstile is Hitachi. The payment system that sort of takes your card is Hitachi. The rolling stock of the train is Hitachi. The signaling system is Hitachi. So I think what we bring to the table is years and years of experience having done, what we're telling our clients. And often enough, we can demonstrate to you that, anything that we're sort of recommending to you, we've actually sandboxed it in our environment. So I think that's the sort of the biggest piece out there when it comes to, what differentiates Hitachi. The other piece I would talk about is the is
Mhm.
just the way Hitachi's been set up. It's at heart, at its core, a manufacturing company, which means there's a significant amount of investment that goes into R&D, and this R&D is not sort of focused on, hey, we need to see returns, within a year. There's some research initiatives that have been going on for years, and that's
Mhm.
because the organization believes in that research. So sometimes, when we talk to clients, we're able to bring in colleagues from the one Hitachi that you talked about, from our R&D
Right.
teams who've been working on some issue, and some of it may be, not directly relevant, but in terms of thought leadership, I think they're incomparable in terms of the approach that they bring, and the critiques that they have sort of that they have actually dealt with when they presented this in a research setting. So I think that's the other piece that we would talk about. And finally, I think the one piece I would talk about is really Hitachi's mission, which is, contribute to society through the development of superior technology and products. So we take that very seriously. Our focus is on sustainability, and that's not an option. So, when we talk about Industry 5.0 and the human-centric approach, that absolutely resonates with us at Hitachi, because that's who we are. So I think that's really the few differentiators that I would talk about when it comes to Hitachi and how we sort of relate to our clients and contribute to society. So that's us.
Thanks, Anupam. And can you share some examples on how Hitachi is helping clients to connect enterprise innovation and operational excellence? And as a Hitachi leader, what suggestions would you give to, say, for example, any enterprise that is just beginning their digital journey, and how can, say, for example, Hitachi act as a trusted partner to help them in accelerating that innovation?
Yeah, the one that I would absolutely highlight is the role that we have played as part of the larger Hitachi ecosystem, with the at the most advanced digital factory. We call it the MAT factory over in Hagerstown, Maryland, where Hitachi Rail has is built out a plant
Mhm.
to basically supply rolling stock to the Washington Metro and a couple of other sort of suburban transport entities. So really, the role that we played was bringing in, IT/OT integration. Okay, that's sort of our signature when it comes to what we do. So, basically integrating computer vision with robotics. We had sort of spot docs from Boston Analytics, and bringing it all together in a way that sort of makes that factory sort of the showcase, not just for us, but, across the manufacturing domain. So I think, where the role that we played, and again, working alongside multiple sort of Hitachi entities, Hitachi Rail being in the center of all of that, is sort of, identifying opportunities, making sure that, what's happening out there in the world is basically implemented in a real life setting, and again, that's what we would do for our clients. I mean, we've we will take approaches that are bleeding edge, but at the same time, are practical and pragmatic to be implemented in their scenario. So I think that's what we bring to the table. We have the thought leadership, we have the credentials,
Mhm.
and often enough, we have the sandbox to show that we've actually done it before. So that's what I would say is how we would approach a client, and that's a signature achievement for us in the past 3 months.
Oh, thank you, Anupam. This was very helpful, and I think We are almost at the end of our podcast, but thank you for, I think we touched upon a lot of things, right, from the innovation to the story on AI, then looking at how should enterprises be, transforming their core operations. You touched upon how Hitachi is kind of helping on talent shortages, global mobility challenges, or say, for example, the uncertainties on trade that we are seeing. So, from an AI adoption, market resilience, solution modernization, and to the integrated One Hitachi story, I think it is very clear to us that enterprises that act now is going to be leading in the future, right? So, I would just want to say in the closing, is there any closing comments that you would want to give to our viewers, Anupam?
No, the closing comments I would just say is I think we live in very exciting times, and I think we should all embrace the excitement and let not the opportunity pass us by, but at the same time make sure that every time we sort of invest in an opportunity, we make it sustainable. And I think there's got to be those two tracks that we talked about earlier, the exploratory track and the industrialization
Right.
track, and I think as Hitachi, we absolutely would help you from a creativity perspective in generating ideas, bringing those ideas to market. But equally importantly, we will ensure that those ideas can be industrialized so that it results in a long-term and a sustained advantage for a client. So I think that's what I would sort of put as part of my closing remarks on this.
Oh, thank you, Anupam. This session with the podcast was very insightful, and thank you for sharing your insights on how can organizations innovate at scale, modernize platforms. And thank you to our listeners. I think if you're exploring how to digitize operations, modernize platforms, and embed AI into the enterprise innovation, I think now is the time to act. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.